Call came in on a Wednesday. I remember because I had just signed the paperwork to extend my route through the end of the month. And my supervisor, a guy named Kowalski, who always smelled like burnt coffee, slid a copy across the desk and said, "You're good through the 31st. I initialed it without thinking. That was at 6:47 in the morning, Central Time. By 6:49, I was back in my rig heading north on I-90. I do long haul. Have for 11 years. Industrial equipment, mostly. Compressors, generator parts, things nobody thinks about until they stop working. The routes take me out for 2, sometimes 3 weeks at a stretch. My daughter knows the drill. She's known it since she was 7 years old and would stand at the front window watching the truck disappear around the corner, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She's 14 now. Was 14 then. Her name is Claire. I need you to understand something about Claire before I tell you the rest. She is not a difficult kid. She never has been. She gets B's and occasional A's. She likes drawing horses in the margins of her notebooks. She volunteers at the animal shelter on Saturday mornings when she can. After her mother passed, that was 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. Claire got quiet for a while. Understandably, we both did. But she came back. Slowly, the way a plant comes back after a hard frost. You're not sure it's going to make it. And then one morning there's something green. I remarried 16 months after my wife died. I'm not going to defend the timeline. People grieve differently. And I was lonely in a way I couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't sat in a house that used to have sound in it and now didn't. Her name was Patrice. We met through a mutual friend, dated for 8 months, and I genuinely thought that she was good, that she was patient, that she liked Claire. I was wrong about all three. The route that week had a mechanical issue outside of Rapid City. Something in the cooling system. I pulled over, called it in, and by Thursday afternoon, Kowalski told me to deadhead back to the depot and pick up a different unit the following week. That gave me 5 days I wasn't supposed to have. I didn't call ahead. I thought about it. There's a version of the story where I call ahead and everything that happened next doesn't happen. I thought about that version a lot, but I didn't call. I wanted to surprise Claire. I wanted to see her face when she looked up and saw me standing in the kitchen a week and a half early, and maybe we'd order pizza and watch one of those nature documentaries she pretends not to love as much as she does. I pulled into the driveway at 11:20 on a Thursday night. The porch light was off. I didn't think anything of it. I let myself in, set my bag down in the hall, and walked through to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Patrice was at the table with a glass of wine and her phone. She looked up. Something moved across her face. Not surprise, exactly. More like a calculation. "You're home early," she said. "Cooling system problem. They set me back." I looked toward the hallway. "Is Claire asleep?" A pause. Half a second, maybe less. "She's not here. Where is she?" Patrice set her wine down. She explained it in a very organized way, which I should have noticed. People who are telling the truth don't usually have it organized. She said Claire had been struggling, that there had been some behavioral issues at school, cutting class, being disrespectful, that she had spoken with Claire's school counselor, and together they had decided Claire would benefit from a structured residential program. A place called Ridgeline Youth Academy in the hill country outside Kerrville, Texas. She said she'd tried to reach me, that she'd left a voicemail. I checked my phone right there at the table. No voicemail. No missed calls from Patrice's number, or any number, in the past 6 days. She said the voicemail must not have gone through. She shrugged. She picked up her wine. I slept 3 hours that night. In the morning, I called the school. Claire's attendance record showed 2 unexcused absences in the past month. Not a pattern. Not a crisis. The counselor on the line, a woman named Ms. Fuentes, said she had no recollection of any conversation with my wife about a residential program. I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, and I looked at the chair where Claire used to do her homework, and I thought about the way Patrice had looked at me when I walked in. That calculation. Then I got in my truck. Kerrville is about 5 hours from where we live. I drove it in 4.5. I don't recommend the speed at which I took some of those hill country curves, but I'm not going to apologize for them either. Ridgeline Youth Academy sat at the end of a long gravel road off a county route with no cell service. The facility itself was low buildings, beige, institutional, chain-link fencing along the perimeter, not tall enough to be a prison, but tall enough to make a point. There was a sign at the entrance that said, "Building Share Actor through commitment." There were no children visible anywhere. I parked. I walked to the front office. A man in his 40s with a shaved head and a polo shirt came to the reception window and asked how he could help me. I told him I was there for my daughter. I told him her name. He said the program had a strict visitor policy, that visits were scheduled in advance, on approved days, that walk-ins were not permitted. I asked him when Claire had arrived. He said he wasn't able to share that information with me. I asked him who had signed the intake paperwork. He pulled something up on his computer slowly, like he was deciding how much to tell me. He said the intake guardian signature was on file, and that was all he could say without my presenting appropriate documentation. I said, "I'm her father. I'm the custodial parent. I have been her only custodial parent since her mother died. My name is on her birth certificate. My name is on her school records. My name is on her health insurance card, which I am happy to show you right now." He said he would need to speak with the program director. He disappeared through a door. I waited 17 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall above the reception window, a round institutional clock with a red second hand. And I watched that second hand go around 17 times. The program director was a woman named Dr. Sylvia Boone. She came out in a blazer and reading glasses and shook my hand and told me she understood I was concerned. She said Ridgeline was a highly regarded therapeutic environment. She said the intake paperwork had been signed by my wife, who had presented herself as a co-guardian. I told her Patrice was not a co-guardian. I told her we had been married for 14 months and that my daughter's legal guardianship had never been amended or transferred. I told her that whatever paperwork Patrice had signed, she had signed without my knowledge or consent, which meant it was fraudulent. Dr. Boone's expression changed. I said I wanted to see my daughter immediately, or I was going to call the Kerr County Sheriff's Office from the parking lot and explain the situation to them. She said she would need a few minutes. It was not a few minutes, it was closer to 30. I spent them in a plastic chair in the lobby, watching a motivational poster on the wall, an eagle over a mountain range, the word perseverance in block letters, and trying not to put my fist through it. They brought Claire through a door on the far side of the lobby. I almost didn't recognize her. That's not a dramatic thing to say. It's a true thing. She had lost weight. Her hair was pulled back flat against her head, and she was wearing a gray t-shirt and gray sweatpants that weren't hers. She was walking with her arms crossed over her stomach, like she was holding herself together. She saw me and stopped. Then her face did something I had never seen it do before. It crumpled and opened and crumpled again, all in about 1 second, like she couldn't decide if I was real. "Dad?" I crossed the lobby in about 4 steps. I got my arms around her, and she grabbed the back of my shirt with both fists, and she was shaking. Not crying, not at first, just shaking like something in her had been running at high tension for a long time and was only now starting to come down. I said her name. I said her name. I said her name. I said I was there. I said I had her. She said, very quietly into my shoulder, "They told me you signed the papers. They said you knew I was here. They said you didn't want me home right now." I pulled back and looked at her face. I said, "Claire, I did not sign anything. I did not know you were here. The second I found out, I drove straight here." She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were checking something, some internal register, the way kids do when they've been told 2 contradictory things and they're trying to figure out which one to believe. Then she nodded. Small, once. I turned around. Dr. Boone was standing near the reception window, watching us. I told her I was leaving with my daughter. I told her if anyone in that building attempted to stop us, I would consider it unlawful detention. I told her I would be in contact with an attorney before the end of the business day, and that she should make sure her intake documentation was in very good order. We walked out. In the parking lot, Claire stopped walking. She turned around and looked at the building for a moment. Then she got in the truck. Neither of us spoke for about 10 minutes. The county route wound back toward the highway through cedar and scrub oak. And the afternoon light was coming through the trees in long, flat pieces. And my daughter sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap looking at nothing. Then she said, "How long was I there?" I said, "How long do you think?" She said, "I don't know. They took our phones. I lost track of the days." I said, 19 days. She turned and looked at me. 19 days. She turned and looked at me. 19 days. I said, "Yes." She turned back to the window. She said, "It felt longer." I asked her carefully, slowly, what it had been like. I told her she didn't have to talk about it if she didn't want to. She said she wanted to. She told me they were up at 5 every morning, that the first hour was what the staff called structured reflection, which meant sitting in rows in a room with no talking allowed, that the work assignments started at 7. She had been assigned to grounds maintenance, which meant clearing brush in the Texas heat with a group of about 8 other kids, most of them older than her. She said the staff member who supervised the work detail had a habit of standing very close to the kids when he was unhappy with their pace, that he didn't touch anyone, but he stood very close. She told me the food was adequate, that the beds were clean, that there were therapy sessions twice a week with a counselor who, in her words, seemed okay actually, but everything she said felt like it was from a script. She told me 3 of the kids in her work group had been there for over a year. She said she had asked twice to call me. The first time she was told phone privileges were earned over a 30-day period. The second time she was told her parent had indicated she needed a period of no contact to focus on her growth. She said the second time was when she started to believe them. That I had agreed to it. That I knew, she said. I kept thinking, why isn't he coming? He always comes. Even when you're far away, you always call. And then I thought, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I did something wrong and I didn't know what it was, and you decided I was too much. I had to pull over. I sat on the shoulder of that county road for a few minutes with the engine running. Claire put her hand on my arm. I put my hand over hers. I told her she had not done anything wrong. I told her she would never be too much. I told her I was sorry it took me 19 days to find her, even though I didn't know to look. She said, "It's not your fault." I said, "It's not yours either." We sat there a while longer. Then I pulled back onto the road. By the time we reached the highway, I had called my attorney, a family law guy I'd used for the estate work after my first wife died, and given him the short version. He told me to document everything, to not return to the house without him present, and to call him the moment I arrived back in the city. He said what Patrice had done almost certainly constituted fraud and potentially custodial interference, which in Texas is a criminal offense. I also called my sister, who lives 20 minutes from her house. I asked her if Claire could stay with her for a few days. She said of course, before I'd finished the sentence. We stopped at a diner outside of San Antonio because Claire said she was hungry, and I looked at her and thought, obviously, yes, she is hungry. She has been doing manual labor in the Texas summer for 19 days. She ordered a burger and ate it methodically, and then she ate my French fries, and then she ordered a piece of pie and ate that too. She was very focused about it. At some point, she looked up and caught me watching her. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. "Just glad you're eating." She looked back down. Then she said quietly, "They had a rule about seconds." I flagged the waitress down and ordered her another piece of pie. I confronted Patrice the following morning with my attorney present. She had a story ready. Multiple stories, actually, cycling through them the way some people do when they haven't settled on which lie is most defensible. First, Claire had been dangerous. Then Claire had been threatening to harm herself, which was a lie I could disprove with one call to Claire's therapist, who had seen her 2 weeks before she disappeared and filed no such concern. Then Patrice said she had only been trying to help. That I was never there, that someone had to make decisions. My attorney asked her to produce the documentation she had signed at intake. She produced it. She had signed my name on 2 of the forms. On one of them, she had written, in the space for primary guardian signature, a version of my signature that was close but not quite. My attorney photographed everything. The police report was filed the following Tuesday. The Kerr County District Attorney's Office picked it up. They had, it turned out, been watching Ridgeline Youth Academy for some time. There had been 2 previous complaints from families who alleged unauthorized enrollment. There was a question about the facility's licensing that had been under review for 8 months. Our case gave them enough to move. Dr. Bruin's facility was audited. In the audit, investigators found 17 minors who had been enrolled through documentation, irregularities, meaning parents or guardians who later claimed they hadn't fully understood or had been misled about what they were signing. 3 cases involved signatures that appeared to be forged. The facility was closed pending investigation 6 weeks after I walked out of that lobby with Claire. Patrice was charged with custodial interference and forgery. Both are third-degree felonies in Texas. She pled guilty 8 months later as part of a plea agreement and received 4 years of probation, a substantial fine, and a permanent injunction prohibiting her from contacting Claire. I filed for divorce the week after the police report. It was finalized 5 months later. She did not contest it. I have been asked a few times whether I feel guilty about not seeing it sooner, about the remarriage, about the timeline, about trusting someone into my daughter's life when I wasn't home enough to watch what was happening. The honest answer is yes. I feel guilty about specific things. I feel guilty that I didn't notice Patrice pulling back from Claire over the months before this happened. I feel guilty about the missed calls that weren't missed calls, about the signed forms I should have been the one signing, about the 19 days Claire spent in a gray t-shirt in the Texas heat thinking her father had decided she was too much. But guilt has a tendency to consume the space where action should go. I've tried to remember that. Claire has been seeing a therapist since we got home. A good one. A woman who works specifically with adolescents who have experienced institutional or coercive environments. Claire likes her. She says their sessions feel like actual conversations, not scripts. She's been back at the animal shelter on Saturday mornings. She adopted a dog last spring, a medium-sized hound mix with one floppy ear named Biscuit, who sleeps at the foot of her bed and has strong opinions about whether her bedroom door should be open or closed. She still draws horses in the margins of her notebooks. Last fall, I renegotiated my routes. I'm home more now. Not every night. That's not the nature of the work. But I'm not gone for 3 weeks at the stretch anymore. My income took a hit. I've adjusted. A few weeks ago, I came home from a short run, 2 days out, 2 days back. I walked in around dinner time. Claire was at the kitchen table doing homework, Biscuit at her feet, and she looked up when she heard me come through the door and said, with great casualness, "There's leftover chili in the fridge." I said, "Is it the kind with the kidney beans?" She said, "Obviously, that's the only real kind." I said, "Bold stance." She said, "I stand by it." I heated it up. We ate at the kitchen table. She showed me a drawing she'd been working on. A horse mid-gallop, charcoal on sketch paper. The kind of thing that doesn't look like much until you realize how hard it is to draw motion and mean it. It was genuinely good. I told her so. She said, "I've been practicing." I said, "I know." She looked at me for a second. Then she went back to her homework. The porch light was on when I pulled in. I noticed that. I always notice that now. I've spent a lot of time since then thinking about what actually happened. Not just the events, but the mechanics underneath them. How something like this is even possible. How a person can be gone for 19 days, and the people responsible for her being gone can sleep at night. Here's what I've landed on. The whole thing worked because of a particular kind of trust, not the healthy kind, the blind kind. The kind I'd built out of loneliness and urgency and a desperate need to believe that I'd made a good decision. I wanted Patrice to be good, so I looked for evidence that she was. I found it because that's what we do when we want something to be true. We find what we're looking for. That's not a character flaw, it's human. But it has a cost, and in this case, Claire paid it. What I've had to sit with, really sit with, not just acknowledge and move past, is that intelligence doesn't protect you from this. I'm not a naive man. I've run logistics for 11 years. I can read a contract, I can spot a bad deal, I can calculate a route deviation in my head while driving. None of that helped me see what was happening in my own house, to my own daughter, because I wasn't looking. I was away. And when I was home, I was recovering from being away. And then I was getting ready to leave again. There was no space in that rhythm to notice the slow withdrawal. The small signs that something was wrong between Patrice and Claire. That's the part I've had to own. Not the forgery. That's on Patrice. Not the facility. That's on Dr. Treese. Boone, and whatever system allowed Ridgeline to operate the way it did for as long as it did. But my absence, my willful comfort in assuming that everything was fine because no one had told me it wasn't, that's mine. What I've learned, slowly and not painlessly, is that you have to be willing to ask the hard questions before there's a crisis. You have to be the kind of person who checks in not just to say goodnight, but to actually listen. Claire used to give me one-word answers on our calls when she was unhappy about something, and I told myself it was just teenage stuff. Maybe sometimes it was, but I stopped asking follow-up questions a long time before any of this happened, because follow-up questions are uncomfortable, and I was tired from the road and it was easier to take the one-word answer and move on. Patrice made choices, terrible ones. She'll live with the legal and personal consequences of those choices for a long time. But what she exploited wasn't just a signature line on an intake form. She exploited the gap between who I thought I was as a father and who I was actually being. Claire never asked me to be perfect. She asked me to show up. And showing up, really showing up, present, and paying attention, is not the same as being home. I've had to learn the difference. I'm still learning it. The last thing I'll say is this: Claire is going to be okay, not because the bad thing didn't happen, but because she held on to something through 19 days of being told a lie about her own father. She held on to what she knew. And what she knew was that I always come. That even when I'm far away, I always come back. I don't take that for granted. I intend to spend a long time making sure I deserve it.